Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Ben Wilder, Director of the Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill. I'm speaking to you from Tumamoc Hill, known in Atam as Chimamagi Duag, Horned Lizard Mountain, on the ancestral lands of the Savaipri and Tana Atam peoples. This volcanic hill is of prominent ancestral, cultural, and sacred significance of the Atam nations, including the Tana Atam Nation, the Gila River Indian Community, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community, and the Akchin Indian community, as well as the Hopi tribe and the Pasquayaki tribe. The Desert Laboratory recognizes the cultural significance of Chimamagi Duag as the bedrock of our institution and our future actions. This lecture series, and I hope you've been able to join us for a couple of the preceding iterations, is celebrating the creation of the new Tumamoc Resilience Garden, of which the basins are now in and tree planting is next. This lecture series, Planting the Seeds for Tomorrow, is connecting you to the inspiration for this new garden space and its creators to help you envision the community gathering space that will be. The garden space we're creating is based on and will bring to life a number of different knowledge systems and approaches to growing plants in an arid environment. In the first lecture series, we learned from Dr. Aaron Reardon and Dr. Gary Nabhan about the conceptual underpinnings of arid America, a region with an incredible diversity of crop wild relatives and ecological interactions, such as the nurse tree concept that forms the literal overstory for the garden and the food plants that will be below. We then heard from Brad Lancaster, who designed the basins and the rainwater capturing context for our gardens, about how we can capture the rainwater we receive in our desert, especially in an urban setting, and that how we can establish them to survive and subsist for long after we are gone. In our last lecture, I was able to speak with Megan Lopez, Sterling Johnson, and Ruben Chokbach about agriculture and its strong interconnections with culture from the Atam perspective. Today, we will draw inspiration from further afield, turning to the arid regions of the Middle East and the efforts of Israeli scientists and farmers that are leading example of how to undertake arid land agriculture. I am honored to be joined today by my friend and one of our community's great leaders, Joaquin Ruiz. I'm especially excited to speak with Joaquin since the Tumamoc Resilience Garden was largely his idea. When Joaquin first brought me on as director of the Desert Laboratory in 2016, we soon began talking about how to better engage our collective community at the base of Tumamoc Hill and the importance of a garden space in doing so. Now that that space is reality, and we can together continue to talk and create what it can become. Joaquin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. So Joaquin Ruiz is a scientist and leader. He's been with the University of Arizona since 1983. We joined the Department of Geosciences, where he focuses on chemistry and geology to address problems ranging from the origins of life to present-day climate change. He served as Dean of the College of Science from 2000 to 2019. He is the Vice President of Global Environmental Futures since 2019 and the Thomas R. Brown Chair and Director of Biosphere 2 since 2013. He's a member of the Mexican Academy of Sciences and was named a national researcher by the Mexican government in 2010. Joaquin has been at the forefront of many significant partnerships between the University of Arizona and global collaborators, most recently with the French Research Center, CNRS, the government of Mexico City and Mexico at large, and Israel, which we will discuss more today, all of which leverage the University of Arizona's unique capacities to address global change. All right, Joaquin. So to jump in here, tell me a little bit about how you first got connected to the work happening in Israel related to arid land agriculture and the larger opportunity and the potential that you saw.
Right. Well, like many things that happen to us, it was mostly a matter of serendipity, but we were prepared for the serendipity and we acted on it. So the director or president, I think, is of the Jewish National Fund, recognized that the kibbutz in the Negev Desert, that area that goes between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea in Israel, is a model for sustainability and resiliency. These folks produce 120% of their electricity during the day. They are disconnected from the water system of Israel, but nevertheless produce about 60% of the produce that they export, and have an amazing view of how their knowledge should better the world. So therefore, the president of JNF, as I mentioned, felt that this area should have a partnership with a university in the US. Interestingly enough, and it must have been because of donors, they first approached Rutgers University, and that didn't work. And it bounced off of Rutgers because of another enormous leader in our community, a gentleman by the name of Michael Kasser, who is a donor of the university and a donor of the arts and the donor of everything. And they approached him to see if the University of Arizona would have any interest. Michael Kasser then called me, and he invested a little bit of money to basically plant the seeds to see if the partnership would work. That money allowed for a delegation of the Arava Valley folks to come to the U of A. And then a group of us went to the Arava Valley, and it was love at first sight. It was a huge connection of interests and admiration, really, on both ends. So even with COVID coming in between, we've been able to do some amazing things with what is now called the Michael Kasser Institute for Water, Energy, and Resiliency.
Fantastic. Wow. So maybe to help set the stage here a little bit about the region we're talking about in Israel and where the Arava Institute is in that valley, one of the things that I continue to connect to here in our region, and we spoke a lot in the last lecture series, is the long history of humans undertaking arid land agriculture in our region. Well, this is certainly the case there. Can you shed a little light in terms of the history of relationships that the current work is building upon, and if there are any connections culturally between what they approach now and thousands of years ago there?
Well, it's sort of a hodgepodge. So the amazing cultural connections of water harvesting were not because of the Israelis, but in Jordan, there was a culture called the Nabateans. Mm-hmm. And the Nabateans basically were doing exactly what you're doing now at the base of Tumamoc Hill, which was collecting water in basins whenever it rained, right? And you have to recognize that these areas get at most 2 inches of rain a year. So collecting water was a big deal, and that's the cultural part with the Nabateans.
I'm picturing Petra, for example.
Petra is sort of, I'm not sure it's the headquarters of the Nabateans, but it's one of the most impressive sites that they have.
Yeah.
So the Israelis, though, these kibbutz came in, of course, after the state of Israel was produced, and with a vision of making the desert flourish. Now, there had been other big deal areas that were living out of this place before. The most important one, of course, is Masada, which is, everybody knows about Masada because it was one of the last strong points of the Jews when the Romans were in there trying to get rid of them. So they were also collecting water in cisterns in Masada, and they were growing foods of all sorts. But that's not what's happening in the kibbutzim in the Arava Valley. What they're doing is really modern technology to make water, to make the harvesting effective and efficient in a region that, as I just mentioned, has 2 inches of water a year. So the remarkable endeavors that they have gotten into is the creation of soil. They don't even have soil, so they take sand, they mix it with compost, they cook it for a year so that they can get rid of the bacteria that they don't think works or that could be a problem. And then that's what they use for the soils that they plant stuff in. They have groves of date trees that sit on what are called lysimeters. But basically, it's like a big tub, so that all the water that is required by the date trees is recycled. So basically, no water is lost. And of course, the Israelis are known for their uh, drip system irrigation, which is very well used there. So they have all these technologies that they have created, invented, or reused. They have a school, which is called the ICAT school, where they educate future leaders of agronomy of the world. So they have people from Kenya and from Tibet and from Bhutan. We should send somebody from our region there.
Yeah.
And it's truly an extraordinary opportunity for the folks that go to ICAT to get bit by the bug that the Israelis have of making things work and of leadership. So I was quite impressed with that as well. And everybody that went to visit the Arava Valley in that visit with the U of A delegation was just floored by this international school that they have created. So they go all the way from outreach, and they go to food production, and they go to innovation. One interesting thing, they're not part of our group, but they're part of the kibbutzim. So just to get a sense of how this works, there are a variety of institutes that are in this area. Most of them, all of them dealing with water, energy, and food. And they've done a lot of things that are really interesting. The one that just amazed me is that there had been a group that has been in Kenya for a long time in the Turkana region with the Samburu. So I don't know if you know about the Samburu, but the Samburu are a tribe in the Turkana region, and they're pastoral. And they survive from drinking the blood from their cows and milk. That's all they eat, period. And there have been all kinds of challenges with them because, one, there's competition with the zebras, for starters, and of course their diet is not the best, right? Well, these Israelis, okay, so the first group that went there, and they've been there forever, have been the Catholics that have had schools in the region and educating the Samburos. And the Samburos, just to give you another sense for those of you, they're famous sort of cousins would be the Maasai. They're sort of like a Maasai. And so then this group of Israelis from the Arava Valley went to Kenya, and they partnered with the Catholic schools to show the kids about other foods. And they started with watermelon, red and sweet.
Good place to start.
The kids just loved it. And from there, they've been able to transform many groups of Samburu from pastoral to agriculturalists. So they do two things. One is they use the techniques that the Nabatean used to sort of save the water. And secondly, they're teaching these folks to farm. And so they've made vegetarians out of pastoral people. It's sort of like a miracle, really. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on in this region. And the connections that we have, of course, are, they're different groups, but they're connections that we have with the Navajo and with the Yaquis and with the Seris. We can learn from these folks how they've managed to have proper outreach that is respectful and effective, and allows them to have a healthier life without losing their culture.
Makes me think of a lot of the efforts that are happening with the Concac or the Series right now on the coast of the Gulf of California relating to the agrivoltaics and other works, which I know we'll get into more. Another kind of setting the landscape question, you mentioned date palms. I'm one of the major thrusts that we're undertaking with this garden and a lot of the work here is leaning into the species of our region, right? These crop wild relatives, this long history, this genetic germplasm repository of, honestly, hundreds of species from the borderlands region, largely US, Mexico. Is there similar parallel thing happening with this Israeli effort of them leaning into species of that region, or is it more of an eclectic and more of a technological focus on more standard crops?
Yeah, it's more standard crops.
Okay.
But there is an interesting story, and maybe you and I will benefit from it. In Masada, no, it wasn't in Masada. It was in one of the Qumran caves. So these are the caves where they had the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are also in the same region. They discovered a jar with dates that are 2,000 years old, the Judean dates, right? Famous in the Bible, I guess. And these folks from this kibbutz, the biochemist from the kibbutz, was able to germinate these 2,000-year-old dates.
I remember reading.
And they've committed to send me a few. They now, so if we get a few, I'm going to plant some, of course, at Biosphere too. But maybe you should think about having one in Tumamoc Hill, having a palm tree from the Judean dates. That would be sort of cool.
That would be a fantastic story there.
Not necessarily from the region, but certainly quite historical.
That's right. Wow, fascinating. So what specifically do you feel that here in the Sonoran Desert we can learn from and incorporate in our approaches to living and growing food in the desert from Israel?
Yeah. Okay. So as you know, at Biosphere 2, we're creating an ecosystem of food production, which we hope will benefit semi-arid environments all over the world. This ecosystem includes a vertical farm, which we're just about to acquire, a great partnership with native seeds, a partnership with a company that's called Red Sea Farms, and Red Sea Farms comes out of Saudi Arabia with some technology of modern greenhouses that, for example, have panels that allow the right wavelengths in to make food grow but not heat. And also plant genetics, not GMOs, but plant genetics. What they do is they go out in the field and they collect natural species, and just like corn became, right? And sort of breed it so that the most successful stuff comes out. So they, for example, have a patent on a tomato that grows in salty water. And you that have been working with the Seris and the Yaquis, you can see already the power of having something like that grow in northern Mexico. So I see. So part of these connections, which all started from Greg Barron-Gafford's work on agrovoltaics. You mentioned the term, and let me just at this point take the opportunity to explain it. The concept is, well, it seems trivial, but it has so many interesting complexities. It simply is growing food underneath solar panels. Really, it's growing food underneath the shade. And Greg Barron-Gafford, being an ecologist like you are, picked up that idea from seeing the nursing trees in the Southwest, protecting young cacti and saguaros until they get their act together and they can survive our inclement sun. And recognizing that in semi-arid environments, photosynthesis more or less quits around 10 in the morning. And the rest of the day, these plants are just trying to survive. All right, so that was sort of an ecological view. And the question was whether that could be then used for growing food. And instead of just having cardboard boxes creating shade, well, why not have solar panels, right? And therefore, as Greg points out, we harvest the sun twice. One of them is for electricity, and one of them is for food. Now, underneath the solar panels, where we're growing the food, you create a microclimate, so you can grow some foods that otherwise would be more challenging. And importantly, he's now measuring, this is Greg, savings of water that are greater than 50% for the same crops. And the reason is, of course, that the humidity in the soil remains longer and therefore that you need less water. All right. For those that are interested in electricity, the growing food underneath the solar panels becomes a big deal because evapotranspiration from plants, and this is like you and me transpiring, cools the back of the solar panels and makes them more efficient. What nobody recognize, or nobody really, most people don't know, is that I think the highest efficiency of the common solar panels that we use is at around 76 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, of course, never happens. So as they heat up, they produce less electricity, and it's linear. So whatever you can cool them off, you're going to get more power out of these things. Okay. Now, okay, less water, more power, different foods. So what we did with our Israeli friends is send the blueprints of the agrivoltaics, and they got them. They've already built an agrivoltaic system. And what they're going to do is create a system out of it, with wrapping it with software so that you can do precision agriculture. Now, what does that mean? That means that the plants get water only when they need it. That means that you can store water or electricity at the right times. And that means that you can use the electrical output as part of the agricultural system. In other words, you can use the electrical output to pump water or to do reverse osmosis cleaning up of the water. Because another thing that people know is that in regions like ours and regions like in northern Mexico, the quality of the water, which is well water, is pretty bad. Either because there's been incursion of the ocean, or just because it's deep well water, because the rest of it has been already used, like in Tucson. And the deeper you go in a well, the more salty the water gets, and it doesn't reach the levels of the ocean, but it gets salty. And as the water gets crummier, the yield of food gets worse. So cleaning it up a bit also is going to benefit. So that's what our Israeli friends are doing. They also, through a partnership with Kevin Fitzsimmons, and I'm throwing these names out, because I'm sure that some of the people listening to us know him. Kevin has been working in growing systems that go all the way from fish to food, and he has already sent also his ideas to our Israeli partners. And again, just like the agrivoltaics, I joke that we created version 1.0 and they'll create version 2.0 and see where that goes. And then of course, use those to cover the world where it's needed. So you were mentioning partnerships. We're just developing. It's more than a trifecta. It's with four. I don't know how you say it. Quadrifecta, I think, between Sonora, the Israelis, the French, on an international school in agrivoltaics.
Wow.
that would benefit everybody. So in the case for your heart, because I know that's where you're interested in, this school would benefit the Seris and the Yaquis in Sonora. And it's with the support of the Mexican federal government and with the support of the Sonoran government, both their energy and innovation secretariat and their education secretariat.
That's fantastic. I know when some of the first solar panels were going in with the series in Desemboca and Punta Chueca, they had to send a couple community members all the way to India to get the appropriate training. And now it will be there in their backyard. That's fantastic.
Right.
Joaquin, one of the things that's striking me as you're describing these partnerships is how technological the approach is that Israelis are taking. And I'm curious, is that, you mentioned the drip irrigation that they're famous for, and riffing on your version 2.0, is that continuing to expand and refine and what 13.0 or where, is that an element of drip irrigation, thinking the bringing this direction and improving how we think about using the limited water we have and the directionality of that?
Yeah, I think that there are two parts that the Israelis are going to be bringing to us that are going to be very useful. One of them is their water technology, which, as you say, includes version 13 of the water drip system. And of course, the drip system is more complicated than just putting holes in a hose, because it has to do with pressure, the size of the hose, how much water the plants need. So that's where you get into the precision agriculture business. But so yes, that's part of it. And the second thing that we're working very closely together with them is the microbiome of the soil.
Great.
So we have a partnership with them and a company in Phoenix, Cohelia, that produces a product to help soil microbiome. And they've shown that Helia has shown that this product helps produce better food in Peru in almost sand dunes. So they can wake up the microbiome. What they do is it's an algae spray, and the algae is pasteurized, so you don't have to worry about the ecological issues that could happen if you spray some kind of random algae around. But the chemicals in the algae wake up the proteins in the microbiome, which are dormant when the microbiome takes a beat. It's not that they just die, but they're there dormant. Then these things start producing enzymes. And the first thing that happens is that the physical characteristics of the soil changes, because this is sort of like glue that starts, so it starts producing, soil needs two things. It not only needs nutrients, and it also needs physical characteristics that will allow it to drain and that kind of stuff, that will allow the roots to properly be in place. So the microbiome is what does that. The microbiome creates the health of the soil, and it also has complex, and don't ask me to talk about these because I don't really know them well, but it also has complex interactions with the root system, and how the root system of whatever you're growing is going to uptake nutrients better. But it's the whole gamut that microbiome is so important for.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when you talked about earlier about the baking of the soil that the Israelis do, my mind was racing with, well, what happens to all the mycorrhizae in the microbiome there? And it's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, so important.
What they do is they cook the bugs that could be detrimental, so that they never have to use fertilizers. Sorry, not fertilizers, but Roundup. Yeah, so they kill that kind of stuff, but they still will have a microbiome in there because they have compost.
Yeah.
So they have the right chemicals, and then they can wake it up.
Jumpstart it again.
Yeah.
Very cool. So that group that you're partnering with, Helios, is that going into the vertical farm at the biosphere, or where does that fit in?
That fits into the agrivoltaics school. So they're going to be the partners within the French, Israeli, Mexican, U of A cooperative. So that's what they're going to be doing.
You also mentioned briefly that one of the partnerships you're engaging on is with Native Seed Search, right? Yep. And I've heard just a snippet about the idea of testing food plants in our region under increasing stressors in the desert biome of the biosphere. Tell me more. This sounds absolutely fantastic.
Sure. And what I can tell you is my sort of view, and it may not be completely cooked up with Native Seeds. Okay, Native Seeds is interested in understanding what's going to happen to our local legumes and so on as global climate change progresses and our region dries up and our region gets hotter. And we can do some of those experiments at Biosphere too, for sure. And we will do those because we have a desert in there, which we can control to show what our region is going to look like in the future. So that's actually in itself quite interesting. But I am also interested in, and this is where native seeds probably has, I don't know if they have the interest or not, but it doesn't. My interest is also figuring out how to export native seeds to regions that are similar to ours, so that we can help other regions that have semi-arid environments. So the exporting, but in order to do that, we need to figure out how to grow these seeds almost in industrial quantities, or at least show how they grow so that other places can start growing these seeds. So it's where I think I need, where if anybody from Native Seeds is listening, to me, what's quite exciting, in addition to recognizing what's going to happen in our region, which is core to native seeds, is to use the native seeds in an international way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that it's so interesting how, okay, now we're linking food, species, culture, and then climate.
Yeah.
And thinking about how our climate is changing, but also climates around the world. And so we've been engaging on our end with a bunch of collaborators, thinking about food futures, both food futures here in our region. As our climate changes, what are the climate analogs, or where else in the world where's the climate currently that we're going to be in the future? And likewise, in the future, where are places that are going to be like Tucson? So this exchange of not just species, but approaches, technology, and to help guide our conversations, right? Targeting, knowing who to collaborate with, that we're sharing these climate futures and analogs.
I love your vision, Ben. I think that's a terrific vision. And in that regard, it doesn't matter what we do with the biosphere. When you go to Arava Valley, you're looking at a hyper-arid region of what a lot of the world is going to look like. Mm-hmm. So if we can make things work there, we can make things work in many places. So it's sort of the same thing that you're saying. I mean, here we have a semi-arid environment that, if you look at our vegetation, it's not even a desert, really. There's too many woody things, but the rain amount is what makes us a desert, right? Mm-hmm. But if you go to Arava, it's hyper-arid. I mean, it's 2 inches a year and it's just dirt. I mean, it's a real desert. So if we can grow things here and then somehow grow them there, see what the differences are, see where they're dead ends and where they're not dead ends, all that kind of stuff is going to be incredibly powerful to try to ameliorate the consequences of global climate change.
You know, one of the things I love about this angle is food can be so linked to culture, and is a point of pride and hope for many people. You know, I just think whenever I travel internationally, but come back through a port of entry in LA, for example, and because I'm a botanist and ecologist, I often end up at secondary declaring the plants I'm bringing back for science. And often I'm spending an hour or more with other individuals from around the world. And of course, what are they bringing back from India or China? Is their suitcases are filled with seeds and plants of their home region, right?
Yeah.
Bring it here. And I think that, you know, as we lean into the species are already moving across the globe, but if we can do so in a way that makes climate sense, and that partnership of identifying where is the Tucson Sonora Desert climate going to be like across the world, what can we share from our knowledge of what works here and vice versa. I think it can be a really hopeful way to address some of these issues.
I love the way you think about that. Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right on.
And it's fun to think about the set of test plots we have, big scales here at the U of A. I know you think about this a lot, but from the controlled space at Biosphere, the agricultural experimental stations of the U of A, the more community-oriented space here at the base of the hill, our partner spaces at Mission Gardens, the University School Gardens program, who will be learning a lot more in our final lecture. I mean, I could go on and on with all the partners.
I don't think there's any area, any university in the country or probably in the world that has the assets that we have to understand things as global climate change goes on. It's going from Santa Rita, because you can also grow, for example, and this would be an interesting thing in Sonora. I mean, you may disagree or not with cattle growing, right? But nevertheless, it's a big economic part of the state of Sonora, and you could put agrivoltaics underneath pastures as an example. So you use less water in the food production for these animals. So
and less buffalo grass would be nice.
And less buffalo grass. Yeah, right. So I think there are all kinds of cultures. There are the 3,000-year-old cultures and the present-day cultures.
Yeah.
And I think we can address them all if we are respectful of what we're trying to achieve, which is resiliency and sustainability. Right.
And learning from all of these different approaches and how to do so. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, this segues directly here to one of the next question I want to ask you is, just as we're discussing, so one of the things that you've always excelled in are creating these strong partnerships that reach far beyond our campus and region, and uniting with the strengths that you see, collaborative strengths and synergies really at the global level. So when we zoom out, as we kind of have been, what do you see as the larger potential for these stakeholders we're talking about in our community, the university, the Donatum, NGOs, city, county, business, individuals, others, in helping lead the world in addressing how to grow food in a hotter and drier world?
Okay. Well, I think that first and foremost, a little bit about partnerships. I think partnerships work when both entities or all the entities, depending if it's multi entities or two entities, recognize that that the other individual is really interested in learning from them and is really interested in joining thoughts to make things better. In other words, it's a true partnership, and it is not a colonial kind of partnership, which is not a partnership, right? So first and foremost, the partnerships have to be real, which means that that both entities or all the entities are getting something out of it that is good. And that means that if and then if you do that, what won't happen is a bunch of unused technology, as an example, in areas, because it was somebody's bright idea to go and plunk in a refrigerator or whatnot, and people just don't want them. The second thing is, and this is what becomes quite hard, but very satisfying, is a creation of a common vision of what this partnership will do. And typically refocusing all of the partners about what really is the grand idea and the grand challenge that we're all thinking about. So I always end my speeches when I give one in these partnerships that in the end, it's not like I'm interested in making the University of Arizona #1 in the country in food. I'm interested in making a better world. But I can use all this stuff that we have, And it's likely that by connecting all of these partners, everybody will get better. But the goal has to be quite lofty, and everybody has to sort of buy into it, because if not, it always devolves into, what am I going to get out of the whole thing? And that always becomes a challenge. So as you are trying to create a better world by understanding how cities and how cities and semi-arid environments will become more resilient and a better place to live in, with all of the stuff that you're doing, then you get people that will be attracted to what you're trying to do. And it's not, and what you're trying to do is not make Tumamoc Hill the biggest hill or the best hill in the world. No, you're using what you have at your hands, the tools that you have at your hands, to make a much loftier goal. And you do that so well. So that's how you do them. That's how you do that. So so that's what we're trying to do. I believe that that we need to try to stop people from being displaced because they don't have any water or food. We need to figure out how to make oases out of areas that are going to be challenged. Some of those can be Nabatean kind of technology, and some of it may be, getting salty water desalinate, getting rid of the salts. I am agnostic to the technologies, and I much appreciate the technologies that are ancient, but I don't disregard the other ones.
So going from that big picture context and the way to create partnerships, which I love, I mean, almost going back 6 years here, Joaquin, and from when we first started chatting about the base of the hill and all the opportunities that space presents. I'm curious, what is getting you most excited right now when you're thinking about the Tumamoc Resilience Garden, and where do you see its role in this larger vision and its role in our community?
Okay, well, I think that Tumamoc Hill represents a unique opportunity in our community to educate in a truly democratic way, because you get people marching up your hill that could buy the hill, and you have people marching up the hill that I'm sure they don't really know where they're going to get their next meal. So you have the whole gamut, and you have the whole gamut in education too. You have highly educated people that go up the hill, and you have people up the hill that haven't had the opportunity to be educated. I think it's your responsibility. It's all of our responsibility to educate everybody as much as we can on better ways of living. Okay. And so if that's the case, what I like about what you're doing is bringing examples to people in our community of how the community could become better. It can become better by having gardens. It can become better by bringing in biodiversity from in places where we've just shot it. I mean, people don't recognize that that we're very proud of using so little water, and that we basically put rocks all over our front yards, and that the unintended consequence of that was a hit with biodiversity. Huge hit. Birds disappeared, they went away, and so on. So the education that you bring to the community through the opportunities that you have at the Hill should take us all the way back to biodiversity, which makes our community healthier, all the way from the environment to what we eat. And that's really exciting. That is incredibly exciting. And then you can, so you can then not only use local, and what I would just say then is you clearly are anchored with the cultural aspects of the hill, but there's no reason to leave it there. There's no reason not to bring in modern ideas to the solution of the problems. So, like agrivoltaics, you could put a piece of solar panel up there and grow food underneath it. And certainly our ancestors didn't know anything about solar panels, so that would be a new thing, which I'm sure they would be very proud of if they knew that we were doing. So there you go. So I think all of that is truly exciting, and it's and finding a way to have more and more people that are originally attracted to the hill because they do want to be healthier. That's why they're going up and down, right?
Right.
So that the health includes more than just going up and down the hill. That's a big deal. And it's not trivial, for sure, because you're in some ways getting in their way of what they think they should be doing. But on the other hand, as you know, we all vote with our feet. And if the things get exciting enough, they'll stop and look. And then sooner or later, that'll be part of why they go to the hill, not just to run up the hill backwards or forwards or whatever they do.
Yeah, I love it. I couldn't agree more with everything there. You know, I've been asking each one of our guests this question: in what do you want those walking the hill to learn or take with them or be observant in the new Tumamoc Resilience Garden and as kind of as it evolves through time?
I want everybody in our community to take from a book that was written in Tumamoc Hill, have a sense of place. And what an amazing place this is. And that they should all be part of making sure that the amazing place that we're lucky to live in doesn't lose its amazingness, right?
Yeah.
And it's that. So therefore, it's an opportunity that's not only cultural, but it's scientific. It's a way of living. But importantly, it's just being incredibly proud of what we have. And of course, we can't be very proud of what we have when we don't know it.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, it reminds me, Tumamoc Hill reminds me a lot of, I don't know if I've given you this example before, but as you may remember, I lived in Miami. And South Beach in Miami used to be Medicare by the Sea. It was really a rundown place where people would just go there in old homes places, which were very pretty, but that was it, right? And there were these two women, and I cannot remember their names, that were hell-bent on making sure that the Art Deco district did not disappear. So it was all about architecture. It was all about their history. It was all about their previous culture, Art Deco. I mean, besides Havana, I don't know if there's another place that has as much Art Deco as Miami. There probably are, but I don't know. So these two women just basically got in to save all these buildings and renovate them and refurbish them. And all of a sudden, there was a sense of place, a revitalization of the community. Now, you may not agree with what's happened to South Beach, but it certainly is a very different place than it was 30 years ago. And for sure, the Art Deco district has been saved. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, you're doing the same thing, right? You're doing it with biodiversity. You're doing it with the culture of our community. And you have the asset. You have a unique asset to do it. You have the hill. They had the Art Deco hotels. You have the hill.
Yeah. Well, I love, one of the things so keen in that is that small actions can lead to big results. And yeah, that's important for all of us to remember, and how we can all lend support in that vision. Joaquin, thank you so much for your time today, for all of your support in all aspects of the Hill, your leadership and and for being a part of this adventure. So really great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. And congratulations for all you've done.
No.
I had a vision 6 years ago. And that vision, when there's somebody that doesn't make it happen, just becomes a nightmare. You made it happen. So good for you.
It's been an honor. It continues to be. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. And make sure to remember you can listen to this and all of our other previous episodes, watch the video, download as a podcast as you're driving around. And hope you can tune in one more time for the last iteration of this series. And thanks again. Bye-bye.